smoke was already orange on the ridgeline when Gorka Arana found the neighbor's slash pile still burning. He reined the horse in hard enough to make it sidestep. The animal tossed its head once, uneasy, nostrils flaring. Gorka said nothing to it. He was looking past the blackened heap of cut brush and limbs, looking at what had already moved beyond it. The pile had not burned down. It had burned out. Wind had taken it. Dry grass stretched downhill in a pale, brittle sheet, the kind that snapped underfoot and held flame the way oiled cloth holds a spark. Lines of black ran through it now, low and fast, spreading outward in fingers. Each finger reached, paused, then ran again as the wind pressed it forward. Gorka swung down from the saddle and walked closer. He did not step into the burned edge. He did not need to, and he could read it from where he stood. The neighbor had cut timber on the upper slope, left the slash in piles, lit one in the morning, maybe thinking the air was still enough. Maybe thinking he would tend it. Then the wind had come down off the Sierra like it did most afternoons, dry and steady, and the pile had thrown sparks into the grass. No break cut, no clearing, no control line. Gorka turned slowly and looked toward the river. There were tracks in the dust, fresh. One horse moving fast downhill. The neighbor had seen what he started. He had ridden out. Gorka stood there for another moment, measuring distance in his head. Not miles, not time by clock. He measured slope, fuel, wind direction, heat. Then he mounted again and turned his horse toward home. At the ranch, sat on a lower shelf of land where the oak savanna opened out between stands of pine. 40 head of cattle grazed across the slope, heads down, tails flicking at flies. The house stood near a shallow draw with a line of scrub along its edge. Xabi was in the lower pasture when Gorka came in through the gate. He was working a pair of steers along the fence line, pushing them back toward the herd with slow, steady pressure. He saw his father coming and read something in the way the horse moved, because he left the steers where they were and walked up the slope to meet him. Gorka did not dismount. "Get the axes," he said. "Both of them, and the shovels." Xabi nodded once. No questions. Gorka pointed up toward the ridgeline. "Fire's coming off the neighbor's land. He lit a slash pile and left it." "How long?" Gorka looked at the sun, and then back at the ridge. "Tomorrow afternoon," he said. "Maybe sooner if the wind holds." Xabi turned toward the house at a run. They started on the upper edge of their own land, where the slope tightened and the grass grew thicker between the trees. Gorka marked the line first. He walked it slow, cutting a path in his head before he cut it in the ground. The break had to run across the slope, not straight down. It had to tie into bare patches, where rock broke through the soil. It had to be wide enough that fire would not jump it when the wind drove sparks ahead of the main line. He paced it out, counting steps. Then he drove the first cut with the axe. The grass came away easy at first, dry roots, shallow hold. He chopped low, not at the stems, but at the base where it met the dirt. Xabi followed behind him with a shovel, and scraping the loose material back and throwing it downhill. They worked without speaking. By midday, the sun had burned the last of the morning haze off the sky. Heat settled in hard. Smoke from the ridge moved in low bands, carried by the wind. It stung the eyes. It dried the mouth. Gorka stopped once to look back. The fire had spread wider. He could not see flame from here, not yet, but the smoke told him everything he needed to know. It was moving steady, not racing, not stalling. It would come. He took a drink from the canteen, handed it to Xabi, then went back to the line. They cut until the light shifted. Not until they were tired. until the light changed enough that the shadows lengthened across the slope and the ground lost its sharp edge. Then Gorka stood straight and drove the axe into the dirt to hold it upright. "Ah, we switch," he said. Xabi did not argue. He dropped the shovel and sat where he stood, pulling his hat low over his eyes. Gorka took the shovel and worked the line behind him, clearing what Xabi had cut. The rhythm changed but did not slow. One cut, one scrape, one step forward. The line grew. By evening, the break stretched nearly halfway across the upper slope. It was not wide enough yet. Gorka knew that. It needed another pass. But it was a start. Smoke thickened as the sun went down. The sky took on a dull red color where the fire sat beyond the ridge. Gorka looked at it, then down at the cattle. "They move tonight," he said. Xabi stood, rubbing his hands once against his trousers. "Where?" "The river bottom. Grass is shorter there, less to burn." Xabi nodded. They walked down together. Moving cattle at night is slower work, and the animals see less. They hesitate more. They bunch and break without warning. Gorka took the lead. Xabi worked the rear, pushing stragglers forward with low whistles and the occasional throw of a clod of dirt. They drove them toward the break, 40 head spread wide across the slope. The first time they reached the line, a few of the cattle balked. The bare strip of earth cut through the grass looked wrong to them, open, unnatural. Gorka stepped in front of them, pressing them forward with his body, forcing the first few across. Once those went, the rest followed. They moved them through in groups, back and forth, back and forth. By the time the moon rose, half the herd stood on the far side. Xabi's hands had started to blister before sunset. By moonlight, the blisters had broken. He did not stop, and he wrapped one hand in a strip torn from his shirt and kept working with the other. When that hand split as well, he switched grips, using the heel of his palm to push the shovel. Gorka saw at once when they crossed paths. He said nothing. He handed Xabi the canteen. Xabi drank, wiped his mouth, and went back to the herd. The cow went down just past midnight. They were pushing a tight group through the break when one of the older animals stepped wrong on the uneven ground. Its front leg folded under it, with a sound that carried even over the low noise of the herd. The animal went to its knees, then onto its side. The rest of the cattle surged around it, breaking the line. Gorka moved fast, cutting through them, forcing space around the fallen cow. Xabi came in from the rear, pushing the others clear. They got the herd moving again first. Well, that was the priority. Always at the priority. When the last of them had crossed and settled on the lower side, Gorka turned back. The cow was still down, breathing hard, leg twisted at a bad angle. There was no time. Gorka drew the rifle from the saddle. He stepped close, placed the barrel where it needed to go, and fired once. The sound rolled out across the slope and faded. Xabi stood a few steps back, watching. Gorka lowered the rifle, then looked at the carcass for a moment. "Leave it," he said. Xabi nodded. They went back to the herd. They worked until the sky began to pale. By then, all 40 head stood in the river bottom. The grass there was shorter, grazed low over the season. Patches of bare dirt showed through. The ground held a little more moisture. Not enough to stop a fire. Enough to slow it. Gorka walked the edge of it. He counting again, distance, direction, wind. He turned back toward the slope. "We go up," he said. The second day was harder. Heat came early. The smoke settled lower. Breathing felt like drawing air through cloth. They widened the break. What had been a narrow strip became a band of exposed earth, twice the width, then more. Gorka cut into the roots of the smaller shrubs, levering them out with the axe and dragging them clear. Xabi followed, scraping down to bare dirt wherever anything remained. They worked in shifts again, shorter now, faster. The fire was closer. By mid-morning, they could hear it. Not loud, not yet. A low, steady sound, like wind moving through leaves, except there was no change in the air around them. By noon, the sound grew. A crackle layered into it, a sharp, dry popping as brush caught and burned. Gorka stopped once and looked up. He could see it now, a line of flame moving along the ridge, orange against the dull sky. Not high, not towering, but steady, relentless. He judged the distance again. Hours. Not many. Xabi stumbled once. Just once. His foot caught on a root, and he went down to one knee, the shovel slipping from his hands. He stayed there for a second longer than he should have. Gorka saw it. Up, he said. Xabi pushed himself to his feet. He picked up the shovel. They kept working. The wind shifted in the early afternoon, not a full turn, just a change in angle. Gorka felt it on his face and knew what it meant. The fire would come faster now. He drove the axe harder. The line was nearly complete. It ran from one rocky outcrop to another, tying into ground that would not carry flame easily. But it needed one more section, and a gap of 20 yards where the grass still stood. They moved to it together, no shifts now, both of them cutting, clearing, throwing dirt. The sound of the fire grew louder behind them. The air took on a new quality. Not just smoke now, but heat, a pressure against the skin. Gorka did not look back again. He finished the line. Down, he said. They dropped tools where they stood and moved fast toward the river bottom. The cattle were restless now. They could smell it, feel it. Gorka and Xabi spread out, keeping them from bunching too tight, pushing them toward the lowest ground. The first sparks came over the break as they reached the herd, small, bright, carried on the wind. They landed in the grass and died where the ground had been cleared. A few caught on the far edge and burned out in seconds. Then the main line hit. Now, fire does not stop the way people expect it to. It does not slam into a barrier and die. It presses, it leans, it looks for a way through. The line they had cut held. Flame ran to the edge of the break and dropped where there was nothing left to burn. Heat rolled across the bare earth. Smoke pushed forward in thick waves. Sparks flew over. Some caught in small patches beyond the break. Grass flared, then burned out where the ground turned thin. Gorka watched it for a moment. Then he turned his back on it. Keep them moving, he said. They held the cattle in the river bottom as the fire moved across the slope above. The sound grew, then peaked, then began to pass. Flame climbed into the trees where it found fuel, dropped where it did not. The house sat in its path. Gorka saw it once through the smoke. A shape, then a flicker, and then nothing clear. He did not go to it. He stayed with the herd. By late afternoon, the main front had moved past. Smoke hung in the air, thick and slow. The ground above the break was black. The ground below held. Gorka walked the line once more, checking for spots where fire might have crossed. There were a few, small, already dying. He stamped them out with his boots. Xabi followed behind him, watching where he stepped, doing the same where needed. When they reached the end of the line, Gorka stopped. He looked back across what had been their land. The house was gone. The barn with it, the upper pasture burned clean. He stood there for a moment, then turned away. They spent the night in the river bottom. No fire, no light. The cattle settled slowly, then lay down in clusters. Gorka sat with his back against a low bank, a hat pulled down, eyes half closed but not sleeping. Xabi sat a few feet away, hands wrapped in cloth, breathing slow. They did not speak. Morning came clear. The wind had dropped. Smoke rose in thin lines from the blackened ground. Gorka stood and stretched once, then looked at the herd. All 40 head were there. He counted them anyway, twice. Then he looked up the slope again. "Come on," he said. They walked back together. The break was still visible. A line of bare earth cutting across the char. Above it, everything had burned. Below it, patches remained. The house site was a square of ash and blackened posts. Gorka stepped into it, looked around once, then stepped back out. There was nothing to salvage. He turned to Xabi. The boy was looking at the same ground, not moving. Gorka spoke then. "We rebuild," he said. "We always rebuild." Xabi nodded. He bent, picked up one of the axes they had left near the line, and tested the edge with his thumb. Still good. He wiped it once on his trousers and straightened. They stood there for another moment, then turned together toward the river bottom where the cattle waited. If Gorka and Xabi's story held you, hit the like button. It tells us to keep these stories coming. Subscribe to Wild West Survival Chronicles so you don't miss the next fight for survival on the frontier. Drop a comment below. When the fire hit that line they cut by hand and held, what did that moment mean to you? Because out here, the next survivor is already waiting.